One of the common arguments I hear from ecclesialists is that in Protestantism, you're constantly on the lookout for false doctrine and trying to build everything from the ground up. But in Roman Catholicism or Eastern Orthodoxy, that really isn't the case. You can sit back, relax, and let the church tell you what to believe. The intellectual stress and worry of needing to be able to interpret the Bible is oh so unnecessary. Why would God do this to us? Our salvation depends on our interpretation of the Bible. But how can we know we're right? If only we had an infallible church to tell us what to believe. But look, there's the infallible Roman Catholic Church or the infallible Eastern Orthodox Church, so we can rest assured that we are not required to personally discern the truth every single day. But is that really true? In this video, I will examine that claim. First and foremost, is it even that bad that we're called to discern things? We're never told that the Christian life is going to be easy, even in matters of truth. Scripture constantly admonishes Christians to discern things. Matthew 10:16 says, quote, "Behold, I am sending you out as sheep in the midst of wolves, so be wise as serpents, as innocent as doves," end quote. 1 John 4:1 says, quote, "Beloved, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits, whether they are of God, because many false prophets have gone out into the world," end quote. 1 Thessalonians 5:21 says, quote, "Test all things, hold fast to what is good," end quote. Colossians 2:8, quote, "See that no one takes you captive by philosophy and empty deceit, according to human tradition, according to the elemental spirits of the world, and not according to Christ," end quote. And there are plenty more. Notably, of course, is Galatians 1:8, where it says that we should not accept a false gospel even from an angel of light. Acts 17 exhorts the Bereans, who checked what Paul was saying. So it's actually funny to me when people say, you don't have to discern truth anymore, as if that's a Christian virtue whatsoever. What I really want to spend my time on is the idea that finding a true church isn't really that hard, and that once you're in the true church, you're good to go. First, what does it take to find the true church? You need to do a lot of work to even get there. So as a side note, I'm using the term ecclesialist that the other Paul coined. I think it's a valid term to define a church body that considers the church infallible in certain circumstances, like a statement from a pope made ex cathedra or an ecumenical council. If Catholics want to lump all who claim sola scriptura in as Protestants, why can't we lump all who affirm church infallibility into one category as well? I don't think that's particularly unfair or bad. You can't just assume that your own tradition is the default and everyone else is wrong without examining their claims of infallibility. It's unjustified. That isn't to say that these traditions are false in light of this. By no means am I saying that. I just mean that if you have a group of churches that all say things are infallible as a church body when making declarations in a certain way, it's not so offensive to classify them as a genus. Anyway, let's look at the requirements to find the true church. You first need to determine if you believe in God's existence. So many people throughout history have claimed different ultimate explanations. Well, which is true? Is it animism, pantheism, panentheism, atheism, theism, etc.? An Eastern Orthodox apologist citing Nicaea II at an atheist has absolutely no effect. Who cares? So you have to dig into natural theology, or at least something that will help you determine that God exists. That's fine and good. Let's grant that you have affirmed theism. Great. Now you have to determine if your understanding of the divine nature is compatible with Christianity. Who cares what the First Council of Nicaea says if you think the Trinity is impossible a priori? You can get off the train here and become a Muslim, a Jew, a Mormon, Jehovah's Witness, etc. But let's say you affirm the Trinity. That's great. Glad to hear it. Now things get easier, right? Well, not really. Was Nestorius right? I mean, there is a splinter group, the Church of the East, which today rejects the Council of Ephesus and all subsequent ecumenical councils. Okay, well now you have to determine if Nestorius was right or wrong. Was that council truly ecumenical? What even constitutes an ecumenical council in the first place? Let's grant that you have determined he's wrong, and that the Council of Ephesus was just in condemning Nestorianism. The Council of Chalcedon surely has no issues surrounding it, right? Well, seriously, the Oriental Orthodox debate is so complex because it gets into the specific terminology of Cyril of Alexandria, how much the Council of Chalcedon binds itself to Cyril's teachings, what Chalcedon says with respect to Leo's tome, etc. And we can go beyond that. But what about other doctrines like the papacy? It's probably pretty important to determine if the office of the Pope is the Vicar of Christ, and that this is a divinely instituted office over and above the rest of the apostles and their successors, and so on. The debates I see daily between the East and Rome, the two largest ecclesialist bodies, are very advanced and require extensive knowledge of the fathers, scriptures, councils, etc., whereby realistically you have to spend much more time on this than on scripture. How do you really know which fathers to read in the first place? The East today seems to not like Augustine in certain respects, for example. Oftentimes, if you cite a specific father on some issue X, you'll get hit with something like, oh, well, this is just the opinion of one father, so now you need more. And how long and difficult is it to understand one father's interpretation of a specific doctrine, especially if that father uses different terminology than we do, and may even change his mind? It's just not so easy. Imagine doing this as a peasant in the Middle Ages, without the internet or ability to read much of the time. So, it does take a while to determine what the true church is. This doesn't disprove any ecclesialist tradition. I don't think that the difficulty in determining one's tradition's truth makes it a false church. I'm just trying to show that the argument of, you need to read the Bible to determine the truth and that's hard and scary, is really not that strong whatsoever and massively backfires when you consider what it takes to join the true church. Cameron Bertuzzi made it seem, in his video, like it was one simple choice that requires a little bit of effort, but realistically it requires a pretty massive amount of effort to determine this, and it would be practically impossible for a lot of people throughout history. But let's grant that you've found the one true church. No discernment left, right? Well, I'm not so sure about that either. Don't you still need to discern what goes on inside your own body prior to any infallible pronouncement? Let's say you're alive at the time of the apostles. Do you just close your ears and say la 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 when the Judaizers are telling you that the males must be circumcised for salvation? What about after that? Tertullian comes to you and says, look at Montanus and his prophetesses. I'm his top guy. You have to listen to him. Do you just follow along? What if you're in an area where Montanus is particularly popular? What do you do before the church directly responds? The big one, of course, is Arianism and semi-Arianism. Imagine being some Christian living between 325 and 381, when a lot of the East was non-Nicene. Do you just sit there and listen to a priest or bishop teach Arianism? Oh, silly me. A priest or individual bishop is not infallible like the ecumenical councils of the church. Got it. But as a peasant, do you not just take a stance on the divinity of Christ for decades, hoping it'll be resolved before you die? Origen died in 253. Many of his teachings weren't condemned for hundreds of years. Do you just let it go and pretend there's no issue with affirming the pre-existence of souls or universalism? Just wait for the church, right? We could go on and on. Do you affirm the Filioque? What about the Protestant Reformation prior to the Council of Trent? Do you have any discernment there? Perhaps they come out and say that this was the case for thousands of years, but not anymore. These disputes are largely resolved. We don't have to worry about Jehovah's Witnesses because the Nicene Creed handled that. It still seems to me that you need to discern what's going on, though. Perhaps it's not so much doctrinal in the same way that you had to avoid Sabellius in the early church, but you still have errant priests and or bishops. Can we just let the Pachamama situation go? Oh, the Holy Father did this, so it's okay. Doesn't really sound like the right attitude that any good Catholic would have. It seems that there are constant debates on everything Francis said or did during his pontificate. What does fiducia supplicans mean? These pronouncements aren't ex cathedra, so do I need to follow them? Is he right? What do I even do if my parish is doing this? At a very basic level, there always has been and always will be discernment. And I won't even get into the SSPX issue. That alone is enough to show for Rome. But the East hasn't escaped this either. Loud voices say that the East rejects original sin and satisfaction theories of atonement, yet I'm seeing some priests say this is wrong. How do you determine what to believe there? Don't you have to discern what the church has taught in the past, comparing what your local priest says? Don't you need to discern what church to go to if you're in Europe with the schism between Moscow and Constantinople? Shouldn't you determine which church is the proper one to attend? Further, you should probably determine if your priest is under a bishop, like a row corps, saying that a certain online priest is not blessed to teach, preach, etc., until his canonical status is clarified. Shouldn't you spend time thinking about listening to him? All this is to say that discernment doesn't suddenly shut down once you join a church that claims infallibility. In ancient times, you had tons of heresies running around, and you didn't have the luxury to simply say that you could outsource your discernment. And today, while the issues aren't quite as bad overall within these bodies, you still have to exercise discernment because a lot of issues have not been infallibly resolved. I found an FSSP guy saying that it's sacrilegious to take communion in the hand. He cited Basil of Caesarea, Thomas Aquinas, John Paul II, among others. Some may respond, oh, well, the churches respond to this. The Vatican website has the general instruction of the Roman Missal, which says it's fine. But this doesn't really get my point. My point isn't that it's always hard to discern. Half the time, it's actually really easy to determine if someone is spouting nonsense. But to pretend that you can just outsource your entire thought is legitimately insane and shows me that they aren't discerning at all. If someone comes up to me and says Paul never met Christ and thus we can ignore him, I have to use my discerning skills and cite Acts. It's not particularly hard. I don't know why discerning things like this is treated as so impossible and daunting, as if there's nothing like this in the ecclesialist churches. So please consider that, as I said, this video is not meant to automatically debunk ecclesialist traditions and to promote Lutheranism as such, but to take away what I think is a very poor talking point popular today. Anyway, that's all that I have on this rant on the status of modern e-apologetics. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching.
Hey everyone, thanks for watching another Scholastic Lutherans video. If you'd like to support us, you can follow us on Twitter at Gerhard's Ghost, or contribute on Patreon at Scholastic Lutherans. There you'll get access to our Telegram chat and other perks. Links can be found in the description. Subscribe, like, or leave a comment, and have a nice day.